I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and even though I'm a day or 2 late, I decided I would share my thoughts on the season premiere, or series premiere really, of the Quantum Leap reboot. Because I actually am a fan of the original Quantum Leap. I mean, are you kidding? It's a great show. I may as well wax poetic about the original Quantum Leap for just a moment so you know where I'm coming from. The original Quantum Leap is one of those shows that you need to see. Even if you don't like science fiction, it's the kind of show you need to see because it's not really science fiction. It's got a sci-fi element to it, yes. The whole premise is that you have a guy who's time traveling and leaping, if you will, that's the term they use, into different people's bodies at different points throughout history contained within his own lifetime. There is that sci-fi element. He's guided by a hologram that only he can see and stuff. But the whole idea of the time travel element, that's just to get the characters from one point to the other. The real heart of the series is that it's actually an anthology series about different types of human drama with a sci-fi trapping to sort of lure you in and give you a framework, but at the same time, it's not really about the science fiction. It's about seeing these dramatic stories. And sure, we have our 2 main characters who bring us through it all, but man, is it a good series. It is one of the great series out there. Unfortunately, it's also one of those series that was canceled before it had a chance to properly end. It has one of the most infamous premature cancellations of all time, leaving it with an ending that was rather ominous, really. And fans have wanted a conclusion for a long time. Heck, Scott Bakula, the original star, wanted a conclusion for a long time. He was campaigning harder than anyone else to have the reboot made. He wanted it to happen. And the network constantly said no, and then they went ahead and made this series, which is apparently a sequel. It's not a full-blown reboot. It is a continuation, just with a completely different cast and crew. And Bakula, well, he's not involved at this point, but they are more than happy to use his image and his story about the character of Sam and implement that in their tale. Using the actual guy, that's just a bridge too far, but we'll still use everything else associated with him in order to capitalize on this thing. I don't want to give the impression that I'm showing my hand too soon here, but anyway, because I'm an original Quantum Leap fan, and because the show was a continuation as opposed to a full-blown reboot, I was curious. So I checked out the pilot. And I realize that it is only the first episode. I do realize that. A first episode is only going to tell you so much of the story, and anything that you might still be wondering about could potentially still be answered further down the line. I realize that. I want to make that very clear. However, a first episode is also meant to set the pace for the rest of the series. Anything that's set up here is at some point going to be paid off further down the line. Ideally, anyway. It doesn't always happen. And it will set the tone, set the basic ideas, give you the baseline for how characters will interact. And certainly the first episode does that. As just a first episode, though, I have to say, I don't necessarily think it was awful, but I'm not really impressed either. Like I said, it's not awful. The acting is good. The special effects the special effects are all over the place. Like, there's one really bad green screen shot the first time Addison has the hologram go off around her when she's in the chamber. That was a bad shot. There's also a shot where she's showing the image of Sam Beckett to the new leaper, Ben Song, and the image of Sam is staying perfectly static even as her hand is moving all over the place. It doesn't last very long, but it does really stand out because the focal point is on the face of Sam. So, yeah, the special effects aren't necessarily great, but at the same time, the recreation of the 1985 setting wasn't a bad one. I mean, it wasn't necessarily that difficult to do, but, it didn't look like modern 2022 setting. So, it's not awful, I will say that. But at the same time, I will say that I wasn't impressed, and I have several reasons why. One of the first things that stood out to me as kind of weird is that there are certain elements that are carried over from the first series into this new series, but they only seem to be carried over because they were in the first series. For example, you know that when you leap, your memory gets basically wiped. In the original series, they called it Swiss cheese memory, where you remember some stuff, but you don't remember most stuff. So there are huge holes of your memory. You might not remember, say, who you are, where you came from, if you had any friends or family back home, but you might still remember certain skills like if you know another language or if you know some form of martial arts or something. So that carries over into the new series, which makes sense. That part at least makes sense. But another element that was carried over was that, part of the whole Swiss cheese memory thing is that Ben, like Sam, does not remember that he has someone waiting for him back home. In Sam's case, it was his wife. In Ben's case, it's his fiancée. But his fiancée is Addison, who is taking on Al's role in this series. She is the hologram that appears to him. And even though he doesn't remember his relationship to her, for some reason, Addison doesn't tell him. And again, that carried over from the first series. It was actually sort of a shocking twist that at one point, for the brief moment where Sam and Al switched places and Sam was actually back home while Al was the one in the other person's body, Sam remembered that he was married. And one of the first things he asked Al when he remembered that was, "Why didn't you tell me?" The answer, of course, is that Al was told not to tell Sam about his marriage, because if Sam knew, it was believed that would be a distraction from him setting right these historical events that had went wrong. And it would especially be a problem if at some point Sam had to have some sort of romantic interaction with somebody. He wouldn't be able necessarily to do that as well if he knew, "I'm married, this is cheating." So it made sense back then. Here, though, Ben is speaking directly to his fiancée, and Addison is more than willing to share a bunch of different things with him, and yet every time she's on the cusp of telling him about their relationship, she stops. And it's not really clear why she stops, other than because that was carried over from the first series. I mean, it would make sense if somebody else were the hologram and they were thinking, well, maybe we shouldn't tell him because that could be a bit of an issue, and I'm very good at keeping secrets, so you can trust me, I won't tell him. But Addison's right there. Ben is staring right at her, and we know that he feels some sort of connection to her by the end of the episode, even if he can't place what exactly it is. And the fact that she comes so close to telling him and yet not, while simultaneously telling him so many other things, really doesn't make sense. And that is kind of a big deal because these are the main characters. This is an important relationship that they have. If they were already romantically involved beforehand, and for some reason one of them is not telling the other who cannot remember about that relationship, that's not a good sign of what their relationship will actually be like. And again, it's not even like they have the excuse of we want him to be able to do his job without distraction, because the original plan in this episode is for them to get him back right away. They think they have the ability to bring him back before he can leap into someone else. It doesn't work out that way, of course, because if it did, there would be no show. But the fact that they have that in mind and they're still not telling him, it just feels off. So that was one of the first major things. And I know it might not seem like a major thing, but it speaks to the relationship of the two main characters, like I said. If there's that problem with our two leads right away, that is a red flag for what will happen later. The other thing I noticed is that this particular iteration of Quantum Leap, as of the first episode, is more focused on thrills. The original Quantum Leap was not opposed to the occasional fight or chase or something, but it was actually very infrequent. Sam could take you out with martial arts if he wanted to, but for the most part, conflicts were resolved through talking, through a matter of willpower, things like that. It wasn't an action series, not averse to action, but not driven by action. So you were going to have those more grounded tales. But in the new series, we open with a thrilling car chase, and we end with having to dispose of a bomb. And the whole thing is about this elaborate heist that's being held to steal the Hope Diamond. So I had a feeling based on the ads that I saw for the show that it was going to be a little more action-packed, and I was curious to see how that would go. I do think it does kind of miss the point. It's like they don't necessarily want to tell a dramatic story because they think that will somehow lose people. So they need to up the tension a little. They need to throw in the action in order to make it more thrilling, which they wouldn't need to do if they just focused on telling a compelling story. It's not that it's bad action per se, though, I mean, it is relatively simple. Like, they only have so much time in the episode, of course, and they only have so big of a budget, so they have to get through it very quickly and as cheaply as possible because they got to save money for the CGI and green screen effects that also aren't going to look very good, as established. But I don't know. I don't feel like they had to focus on the action like they did. They chose to. I don't know if that's going to be a staple of the series going forward, but like I said, it seems like it's going to be. So we will see, I guess, but I just don't think it was really necessary if they really wanted to stay true to the spirit of Quantum Leap. And lastly, there's how the episode is formatted, which is that we are following Ben as he has jumped into the past and is trying to set something right, but that's only half the episode. The other half of the episode is back in the present, where the people actually running the whole Quantum Leap project are trying to figure out how to get him back. This mystery with why he stepped in the first place, who was with him when he did it, what this mysterious algorithm on the computer is. There's this grand conspiracy, apparently, and that wasn't part of the original show at all. Not even a little. They did occasionally, very, very occasionally, go back to the present, well, the 1995 present, to show what was going on there, but only when it was absolutely necessary to the plot. It would usually somehow tie in directly to what Sam was doing at some point in the past. So, yeah, the fact that they're dividing it up like that for the new series, I feel like that's going to cause more harm down the line, because any time spent with these other characters is time taken away from Ben in the past. And like I said, that was the original draw of Quantum Leap. Seeing this man going around to all these different time periods, inhabiting different bodies, interacting with different people, and addressing these different dilemmas in people's lives, whether they were deeply personal or spoke to the greater community in some way. That was the point of Quantum Leap. We didn't need to know about some mysterious computer thing in the future. What we needed to know was, will Sam solve this issue in time? But the new series feels like it has to have that mystery to hook people in again. It's part of the whole we need to add thrills thing. We also need to have a mystery so that people will want to keep tuning in, because they won't tune in if there's no mystery, right? It's not like they actually will want to see what the next story is going to be. We need to dangle a carrot in front of them, J.J. Abrams mystery box style. And again, it feels kind of like a cheap move. The original show did not need that. I recently finished reviewing the different episodes of Primal Season 2. That's Gendy Tartakovsky's Primal for any of you newcomers joining us. And I saw a lot of people saying that they felt the ending of Season 2 was rushed. You want to talk about rushed, look at the way they wrap up the past plot in the first episode of Quantum Leap. Basically, they end with the climactic thing of getting rid of the bomb. There's a big explosion, and then the guy Ben was there to save goes, "You saved my life, man. Everything's gonna be okay now." And it doesn't really feel like it got to that resolution naturally. It feels more like they got there because they ran out of time. But would they have run out of time if they hadn't been constantly going back to the lab and following all these other characters and setting them up? We might have had more time. We might have been able to flesh it out a little bit better. But instead, we had to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was unnecessary to do. And if this is going to be the thing going forward, that is going to be a detriment to the series. There are also other things, like little continuity issues. For example, whenever they talk about why people who leap go back into these different bodies and why setting things right is the necessary requirement for jumping forward and potentially getting home, all they constantly say is, we don't know. Some sort of flaw in the program, but we don't know what the flaw is. And I'm sitting there as a fan of the original thinking, you should know. You really should know, because the original show made it very clear the reason for this whole thing was because God was in the machine. Literally Deus Ex Machina. God was causing Sam to leap around to these different points because it was part of the divine plan to set these things right. It's not like that was a secret or anything. It's not like it was speculation. They knew that in the original series, and you would think somebody would have set it down in the notes somewhere. But in the new series, apparently everyone's forgotten about it. There might be one or two lines hinting that they'll bring that part back, and it'll be some new shocking reveal again for people who haven't seen the original. But at the same time, I'm kind of skeptical about that. After all, it's no secret that modern entertainment has this aversion to implying that anything divine exists. And I'm not just talking about God in the Judeo-Christian sense. Look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Look at how long it took for them to unironically call Thor the God of Thunder. And look at what they did to him after they called him that. So, Yeah, I'm not surprised this element was dropped, but it does create a bit of a continuity error for me. So, in the end, like I said, I don't think the pilot episode is awful, but I'm not really impressed with it either. I suppose I can give it a couple more episodes to see what they do with it, but I'm not really thinking this episode is a good sign of what's to come. So, I don't know, we'll see. I'm a huge fan of the original show, like I said, and it's possible that it's just my own personal bias talking, but I was willing to give this show a chance. I'm not opposed to remakes. Sometimes remakes can be good. Sometimes remakes can be better than the original. But this doesn't feel like it's really there just based on this first episode. I'll give it a couple more episodes to see if it can win me over, though. And before I end the video, I'd just like to point out that not once during this whole video have I said that my issue with the episode is that the casting is diverse. So, if you're going to try saying that's why I wasn't impressed with the episode, you are just demonstrating that you did not listen to what I said. So, take that into consideration as well. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the first episode of the Quantum Leap reboot. Not impressed, but we'll see what happens next. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.